Hello.
Hi guys. Thanks for coming. Okay, so welcome to the second lecture in this series, Sustainable Project Management. Right, this week what I want to do is just try to contextualize a little bit. So last week I gave you a bit of an introduction to what we'd be covering over the next few weeks. And today what I'm going to do is do a bit more on that. I'm going to contextualize a little bit what why we're here again. So why are we worried about sustainability? Why is it here in project management? What are the big issues that we are trying to deal with? Okay, as people, as professionals, and as project managers. And then what we'll do in subsequent weeks is start to break it down and down and down, okay, to what this means for you in your job. Okay? So today we're going to be talking about the global environmental issues. Some people call them the wicked issues. Okay? The big issues that we are facing as a society. Some of this will be familiar to you, some of it won't. So use it in the spirit that it's intended. So the big one first, climate change. Have you all seen that the IPCC 5th assessment report came out last week? Has everybody read it? Yeah. Oh yeah, people have read the whole report. Yeah. This is like basically the summary of the science of climate change. So this is quite a timely lecture, if you like. So climate change, what is it? Climate change, I guess, linked to global warming. So it's the warming of the global average temperatures across the world. And it's driven, of course, by global warming, the greenhouse effect you'll come across. So very simply, here comes the science, if you're in it. Very quickly, greenhouse gases collect in the atmosphere, so that's carbon dioxide mostly from man-made human emissions, collect in the atmosphere. What that does is it stops some of the heat escaping and some of the ultraviolet rays escaping that would normally escape into the upper atmosphere. So the more they get trapped under this nice blanket of gases, the more the Earth warms up. And essentially, that is climate change. That's the greenhouse effect. So it's this lovely kind of nice thick blanket of carbon dioxide and other gases which is causing the problem. And how do we know it's happening then? Okay. How do we know this? Can we be sure that we have a warming climate? Especially when you look outside and you're like, oh, it's a bit colder this year than last year. Oh, it's a bit warmer this year than last year. That's not climate change, that's weather. Weather happens, yeah? Day in, day out, hour by hour. Climate is a long-term measure of weather and heat and climate variability. So how do we know it's happening? Well, we're often told that there are indicators, 7 positive, 3 negative indicators of climate change. If we can see these things happening, then we have an idea that maybe there is something happening with the climate. And we can see this happening. We can measure this. Okay? This is not opinion, it's not speculation. This is real empirical scientific measurement. So if we're going to have some climate change, some global warming if you like, we might see ocean heat. More heat in the ocean. We can see that, we can measure that. We might have rising sea levels. We have got rising sea levels. We can see sea surface temperature rising. We can see more humidity in the atmosphere, more temperature over the oceans. We can see retreating glaciers, retreating snow caps, and we can see sea ice melting. We know that's happening. We can see it with our own eyes, okay? We've been studying it for years now. So the Earth's climate is changing. That's not in dispute, okay? It's changing. To give you another idea, this is showing the changes of heat from the 1880s all the way up to the year 2000. Or 2010, I can't remember how far it goes. This is showing the increase in average temperatures over the globe. This is measured by NASA, okay, using their satellites. They're not, not usually known to be a bunch of kind of conspiracy theorist hippies, NASA. They are quite robust scientists. And this is showing what's happening. We can see, we can measure, we know the Earth is warming. No dispute on that. So why is it happening? Is it natural? Is it man-made? Is it a bit of both? Well, the answer is yeah, it's a bit of both. So how do we get carbon dioxide into the air, which is the main cause of rising temperatures? Well, respiration. Trees, plants giving off carbon, okay? It leaves about 1.19 gigatons a year as plants and forests degrade. But also takes in 120 gigatons per year through photosynthesis. So yeah, so we get carbon coming out of vegetation. But it goes into the air, and then it comes back again when we grow. What about land use? Yeah, same thing. We get a little bit coming up from our land use, from grazing our cattle, from all the things that we do normally. But again, as we grow more crops, we take more carbon out of the air. It's kind of a neutral cycle. What about ocean degassing? So this is essentially methane and carbon dioxide, which is stored in the ocean, rising into the air through various natural processes. Yeah, 88 gigatons a year. Ocean absorbs about 90 gigatons a year. So you see the point. These natural forces that help warm the climate, they're kind of cyclic. Okay. The big problem is when we get to places like this, fossil fuel burning. Okay. So burning fossil fuels in order to produce energy and products for ourselves. 6 gigatons per year. Does it come back? It just goes into the atmosphere. We don't have that natural kind of cycle that we do here. So climate change has natural factors, always will have. Okay? Global warming will always have natural factors, always has done. The difference is we're adding to it, we're exacerbating it. Okay? And it's the speed and the pace of that which is the problem. So our fingerprints are all over the crime, as we say. And again, we can see this. We can see there's more heat returning to the earth. We can measure that. There's more fossil fuel carbon in the coral. The patterns of ocean warming, more fossil fuel carbon in the air. We can measure it. We can see the carbon there, or we can measure. We can't see it. We can measure it. So we know it's happening, and we now know it's due to us. So wait, this is all our fault. Oh, where's it gone? That's climate change for you. The lights are going out. How strange. Do you know what? There's a big light flash and it says lamp. I think the bulb's gone in it. Right, if you all huddle around my laptop. Right, how do we deal with that? I was just about to get to the bit where the lights go out as well. Turn it off and turn it on again, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Because what happens is usually I phone IT and say, can you come and help me? Say, have you turned it off and turned it back on again? Yeah. Can all the IT project managers please come to the front of the... Okay, bear with me. Right, try turning it on off, now I'm going to hit it. Bear with me, we'll see if we can get this back on. But there we go. Luckily, or unluckily, depending on your point of view, we're back. Okay, so climate change is happening. We know, we can measure it, we can see it, we can feel it. We know it's happening. No dispute there, okay? So wait, this is our fault, is it? This is our fault. So to what degree do we believe that? This is the famous hockey stick graph. I don't know if anyone's ever seen this before. It's often used to kind of demonstrate humans' effect on climate change. So Michael Mann, he was a NASA scientist again, and he measured the variability in the temperature of the Earth all the way back to the year 1000 onwards. And what we can see is this variability. This is natural climate change, natural kind of variability in the climate, up and down, depending on natural forces. But then we get to the late 1800s to the early 1900s, and we see it rising. We see it going up. We see it going up and up and up and up. And what do we know about what happened in the Western world in around about the year 1900? Yeah, we had the Industrial Revolution. This is when we started putting carbon into the air. So we overlay carbon emissions with temperature, and we can clearly see that the two correlate. Okay, so this is the famous hockey stick graph, so called apparently because it looks like a hockey stick. Those of you that have read the 5th assessment report of the IPCC this week in the paper, you will see that this statement has come out. It's extremely likely, 90% confidence, more than half of the observed increase in global average surface temperatures from 1951 to 2000 were caused by the anthropogenic, i.e. human, increases in greenhouse gas concentrations and other anthropogenic forcings together. So this is the IPCC saying it's 95% confident that humans are causing global warming. 95% of scientific terms is almost certainty, okay? Let's put it in context. We're 95% sure that smoking kills you, okay? That's the kind of confidence we're at with global warming. We're 95% sure that this is due to humans. So who are the ITPC? What the flip is who is the IPCC? So these are the guys that are telling us that this is happening. Are they just some bunch of crazy nuts, you know? Or are they sponsored by Greenpeace or whatever? But actually, no, it's a scientific group. They were set up in 1998 by 2 divisions of the United Nations, okay, to look at this, to try to look at the science and make an objective assessment of what was happening. So the goal was that it would provide policymakers with the cutting-edge information about climate change. It's run by this guy here, Rajendra Pachauri. He's an engineer and an economist professor from India. And his task is to basically look at all the science. He also writes erotic books, which is a bit strange. He's retiring in 2 years' time to spend more time writing these erotic books. So there we go. The IPCC, what they do is, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they assess the body of published climate science and highlight the most important findings. They do not do research. They just look at all of the research on climate change over a period, in this case 6 years, and they determine what the consensus is. Okay, what is the science? What is that body saying? They do not do their own research. So can we believe these reports? Well, it depends on your point of view, I guess, but here's some numbers for you. There are 209 lead authors who work on this report over 6 years, and these are professors, best minds in the world. Okay, 600 plus authors who contribute to writing these reports, 1,089 self-appointed experts, so these are people who are not academics but people from industry and around the world. 9,200 scientific publications that they look at over these 6 years, and 54,677 comments made on the full report. What I'm trying to do is saying it's not a small piece of work, it's extensive. We've got something like 30, I think it's 120 countries are involved in it. 38 countries are what we know as developing nations. It's a worldwide consensus. It's not an American, UK conspiracy or anything like that. So, can we believe the credibility of IPCC? I would say so. It's up to you to make your own mind up on that. And finally, when they've looked at all this science, they've looked at 9,000 reports over the last 6 years. They say there's 97% of these reports will say that that humans are causing global warming. The scientific evidence is overwhelming. So what we're saying is, of all those reports, positive and negative, 97% of everything says this is happening. So the scientists tell us it is happening. To what degree you believe scientists is up to you. But I believe scientists much more than I believe the media. And I believe scientists more than I believe the governments. Because science, good science, doesn't have an agenda. But I would say that because I'm a scientist. Okay, so what? So climate change potentially is happening, it is happening, it's human related. So what? What does that matter? And this is something I've asked you to do in your task, which we'll discuss a little bit more deeply in the seminars. So what are the projected impacts? Bearing in mind, we're about here at the moment, about 1.8 degrees. We're up here on this scale of impacts. So this is from the last IPC report, which was 2007. So we know we're going to see falling crop yields in many areas, particularly developing regions. There may be some benefits to actually a warmer climate. We can grow more wine in the UK. We can grow better grapes. Great, fantastic, I'm quite pleased about that. There'll be greater crop yields in places like the USSR, Russia, and those kind of states up there. Okay, so there are some benefits to a degree of a moderate warming. However, as usual, it's the poor old, what we call developing countries who take the brunt of it. Okay, desertification, less crop yields, more heat. And that affects us all over the world because of economic migration and people moving to try to find better places to feed their kids. Water. Small mountain glaciers will disappear. Water supplies are threatened. So we've seen this in the Himalayan glaciers, which are retreating massively, and they actually produce 90% of the fresh water for the Indian subcontinent. So if that glacier goes, well, how are these people going to irrigate their crops and feed themselves and use water? Extensive damage to coral reefs, rising intensity of storms. There's a report out last year which suggests that around 50% of these crazy storms we've been having over the last 5 or 6 years can be directly linked to climate change. Things like Hurricane Katrina, the more heat in the ocean, the more potent the hurricane. So we know that we're going to have these problems. Once we get up to 4 degrees C, we're in big trouble. Failing yields in many regions, sea level rise threatens major cities. There's a great video on YouTube. They did some work on modelling what would happen at a 4-degree rise in temperature to sea level in London. If you don't like the southerners, which a lot of people in the northeast don't, you can watch London get completely overwhelmed and completely removed off the face of the country, basically. And there has even been some talk about moving the centre of power to Birmingham, guys.
Yes. Yes.
Birmingham, right? Because if we're 50, 60, 100 years' time, we're looking at catastrophic sea level rise, then maybe we need to think about that. So there are impacts that we're worried about at the moment. So what can we do about it? Well, this is what we're doing about it at the moment. No, it's not happening. It's nothing to do with us. We can't do anything about it. This is a kind of politician's view, I guess, at the moment. Okay, we're 95% sure that climate change is caused by humans, but we're not going to do anything about it because it's just too big a problem. In reality, this is what we try to do about it. So when we talk about climate change and global warming and factors like that, we look at it in 2 spheres, I guess. Mitigation and adaptation. This is where you guys will be coming in the future. Mitigation is trying to stop what's happening to a degree, trying to mitigate the amount of carbon going into the air. So energy efficiency in projects and energy efficiency in buildings and our lives. Low carbon energy supply, moving away from fossil fuels. Change of agriculture and forestry practices, changes in consumer behaviour. He says, look at that, it's Apple, iPhone, Apple thing. Yeah, not consuming as much, not using so much resources. That used to be the focus about 5 to 10 years ago. This is where all the work we were doing was on mitigation. Let's just stop climate change. Now we're saying, uh-oh, we're a bit far down the road for that. We've got to start to adapt as well. So this is adapting to what is going to be happening. And again, this is where project managers come in. This is adapting to what the world will look like in 5, 10, 15, 25 years' time. This is risk management, essentially. So, improving the general resilience of social and material infrastructure, improving water resource management, investing in agriculture, estimating and preparing for future disease burdens. Malaria is spreading north. Okay? The malaria, the mosquitoes who carry malaria like warm, humid climates. And it used to be kind of, sub-Saharan Africa was the home of malaria, if you like. Moving north now, we've seen southern Spain actually having increased cases of malaria. We're moving north, moving north, moving north. We need to think about that if we're thinking about the health of our employees, our people, the health of the people that we live with. And we need to manage existing environmental threats, because as you'll see, everything is linked. Everything is linked. Poverty, the environment, biodiversity, it all comes down to the same thing. Okay, so that was the big one, climate change. So next we're going to touch on biodiversity loss. Okay? The loss of our ecosystems, the loss of our species. And what I mean by an ecosystem, the most complex biodiverse area of the world, the Amazon rainforest, is the interaction between species. Humans, animals, flora and fauna, everything. The way it all acts together. Biodiversity. How do we know we're losing our biodiverse world? How do we know that's happening? Well, a bit like climate change, we can measure it objectively. We can see, we can watch and we can see the decline in Mediterranean forests. We can see the decline of temperate and forest steppe, tropical, subtropical forests, grasslands, savannas, deserts. We can actually measure the rate of decline of the Amazon, for instance, the rate of decline of Indonesian rainforest. So we know it's happening. It's not an opinion, it's happening. Why is it happening? Human population growth is probably the main factor at the moment. You know, more people in the world, we need more space, we need more cities, we need more agriculture, more food production. We've got to go somewhere, so we're expanding into the biodiverse world around us. Poverty is another big driver. I said everything's linked. If you're poor and you're a subsistence farmer in an Indonesian rainforest, you're going to chop part of it down because you want to put some crops down to feed your family. That's poverty driving that, not greed, not wealth, but poverty. Urban expansion. The world, in the last couple of years, the world's gone from a majority rural way of living to predominantly urban. You know, more than 60% of that actually now live in cities. And again, cities expand and they expand into the earth around them. Policy failures, globalization, all these other factors. Expansion of agriculture to feed the population. Biofuel production to try to get us off fossil fuels. Wood extraction, biomass burning. And some natural things, well, not natural. Habitat conversion, habitat degradation, habitat fragmentation. It all works in a cycle. The more we degrade our environment, the more the environment degrades itself. Okay? It's like a runaway effect. And again, so what? Who cares? Okay, we're going to lose a few species in the Amazon rainforest. What does that actually mean for us? Well, for humans, we cannot live without any of this. Simple as that. Where do we get our food from? Where do we get our fresh water from? We rely on the microbes, we rely on the flora and fauna to clean our water for us, to make our soil fertile so we can grow crops. It's all linked. Climate change. When I talked about vegetation sequestering carbon, putting it down out of the earth, the less trees we have, for instance, the less fauna we have, flora we have, the more climate problems we have. Disease regulation, and also cultural. We like nature, don't we, really, as people? There's something deep inside us that likes trees, that likes grass, and you know, if we were a completely kind of paved over urban world, our well-being would probably suffer. We're built to kind of interact with these species. And so we know a lot about the links between well-being and ecosystem services, biodiversity. For our security, security from disasters. Did you know there's no such thing as a natural disaster? Yeah? Disasters, I mean, natural events happen all the time. Earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, they happen all the time. It's only a disaster when we're in the way, isn't it? We don't hear about volcanoes that happen in an unpopulated part of the world. Landslides, unpopulated. Tsunamis in unpopulated parts of the world. It's only a disaster when we are involved. And usually we're there for some reason, like we want to farm on the edge of a volcano because it's very fertile. We want to live next to the seas. Yeah?
I mean, it's a disaster if the whole, what do you call it, the woods starts to burn down.
Yeah, but if there's a wood fire and there's no humans around, it's in the middle of the Amazon somewhere, it's not a disaster until it affects us. That's what the point I'm saying. These things happen all the time. Wildfires, grass fires. It has to happen for an ecosystem to work because that's the way that the soil replenishes its fertility. But again, we only hear about it when it's to do with humans. So if we're in the way, it's a disaster. If we're not, it's just a natural phenomenon. That's the point I'm trying to make. So yeah, so we are inextricably linked with it. Health, access to water, strength, feeling well. Social, mutual respect, helping each other, freedom of choice and action. All of these well-being are linked with biodiversity and our environment. So it is, I would argue, important that we try to look after that. And again, these are the feedback loops I was talking about. So the more we deplete our environment, the more we have climate change, and the more we have climate change, the more our environment depletes, etc., etc. And the same with biodiversity loss. Once we start having soil erosion, we start to lose nutrients, the soil starts to fall apart, we get desertification. All of this is linked, okay? So the point I'm trying to make is climate change is linked with biodiversity. Biodiversity is linked with climate change. So climate change-wise, as I said, this is what happens when we lose some of the this is what happens for the natural world. 8 billion tonnes of carbon is taken up by the oceans. 2 billion by vegetation. Some of it remains in the air. We need vegetation. We need healthy oceans. We need healthy biodiversity in order to deal with some of the carbon that we're sticking up there. So we need to get to grips with that. And finally, if you're not interested in that, for instance, your well-being, or you don't see, okay, well, we can just make food or something, it has massive, massive ecological implications. Okay? 640 billion in 2006, $640 billion is what we reckon the pharmaceutical sector was worth. 25 to 50% of the pharmaceutical products are derived from plants. Okay? If we don't have any plants, any biodiversity, we don't have the Amazon, we start to lose some of this economic input. Biotech as well, biotechnology. Products derived by natural genetic enzymes, microorganisms. Agricultural seeds, they have to come from somewhere to start with. Personal care, lipstick, deodorant, all that kind of stuff that we use on a day-to-day basis. Majority of it comes or originates from plants. Okay? So if we're looking down, we've got 31 billion for food products, 12 billion for personal care. If we lose our biodiversity, if we lose some of these species, it's going to have an effect on our economy. And you're project manager, so it's all about the money to a degree. So it is an economic issue. What can we do about it? Well, protecting areas, we do that now. We try to have protected parks, all the rest of it. Prevented species introductions. As we become more globalised, we're spreading plant seeds, we're spreading microbes, we're spreading animals around the world, all of who compete, and sometimes we lose our indigenous species. What we're doing today, informing and educating, which is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make you think about the impact that you will have as a project manager on all of these bigger pictures, because you do. As a person in the world, as a member of society, you have an implication to all of this. We could try to mitigate climate change, sustainable development as a response we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. Economic incentives. There's a lot of talk about paying Brazil to stop cutting down the rainforest. Okay? They're cutting it down as they start to globalise, as they start to become more prosperous, and their people are demanding better wealth, better society. There's a lot of talk about developed countries such as UK, United States, Europe, paying Brazil to not do that. Okay? So they can still develop, but they can just develop in a different way. We can eradicate poverty. Poverty is linked to environmental degradation, which is linked to climate change. And just good stewardship. Let's just be nice, okay? At the end of the day. Okay, so what about poverty and inequality? What is poverty and inequality? Okay, I don't need to give you these figures really, but 1 billion people live on less than $1 a day. A lot of people here will know much more about that than we do. I do. 3 billion people live on less than $2.50 a day. 1 billion children born in poverty. 1 in 2 children in the world born in poverty, etc., etc. Some have no access to safe water. It's not just about that though. It's not just about money and access to material resources. It's also about the right to be a member of society. So this is the Declaration of Human Rights from 1948. It's about poverty is the recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal rights of all members of the human family, justice and peace in the world. So poverty and inequality, how we treat other people, okay, how we manage that. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it's all linked to the other two issues. How do we know we have an unequal world? How do we know there's poverty? It's a silly question, isn't it? We can see it. We know it's happening. This is the Human Development Index, okay? It's a measure of life expectancy, literacy, education, and standard of living across countries. And I haven't put a key up here because I don't need to, do I? I don't need to tell you what the red means or what the yellow means or what the green means, do I? Or do I? We can see where the poorest nations are, and we can see where the wealthiest nations are. It's unequal. It's not distributed fairly. But one of the big reasons why this is a problem for all of us is this. Income and health, life expectancy, they're linked, they're inextricably linked. And again, I don't need to tell you who's at the bottom and who's at the top. So income per person versus life expectancy. 50 years if you live in the Democratic Republic of Congo. If you live in Zimbabwe, well, 52 years and you're dead on average. Mozambique the same, Mali, Malawi, Rwanda, Burkina Faso. Then you get up to India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Indonesia, China, Brazil. Up here, the UK, Japan, Europe, USA, Belgium, Germany, all the Western countries if you like. But why does this matter to those of us who are from Europe and the Western countries? I mean, we're okay, we've got a bit of cash and we're going to live till we're in our 80s. But as this part of the world want to make better lives for themselves, they're all coming up to this part of the world. So we're talking about economic migration, we're talking about environmental migration, we're talking about countries and people, nations becoming more globalized. Okay, so we have to deal with rising populations in the north of the world, in developed countries. So it has impact on all of us. So it's not just us saying, we're okay up there, these people here, it's a shame. It's coming to all of us, okay? So these are all inextricably linked. And again, so what? Okay, who cares? Well, poverty is linked to environmental degradation. And in those countries that I showed you first, down the bottom if you like, it's necessity, survival. You're not depleting the environment because you don't like it or you want to make some money, you don't care. You're just trying to live. Okay, so you're cutting down trees and you're digging up forests and you're paving your, where you live because you just want a better life for yourself and your children. More environmental degradation leads to more poverty leads to more environmental degradation, etc., etc. And what does environmental degradation do? It impacts biodiversity, impacts climate change, impacts us all. It's all linked. Environmental degradation in the northern hemisphere, okay, the Western world as we would say, developed countries. It's all about maybe, we could argue, profit maximisation and consumption orientation. The more affluent we get, the more we deplete our environment. The more we deplete our environment, the more we try to get more affluent. So these cycles are ongoing, and these are issues that I would argue we need to deal with, okay, both in our personal lives and our professional lives as project managers, understanding our little impact on the wider picture. What can we do about it? Tax the rich and kill the poor? Well, that's one reason. It's been suggested we could restructure debt. A lot of the problems we have in some countries, this is Tanzania down here, is that we lent them so much money as nations, UK, US, UN, we lent them so much money that it's like a mortgage. They're struggling to pay us back and they're not putting any resources into enhancing their economy because they're so busy paying us back. In America, we don't redistribute wealth, you earn it. Yeah, that's a particular view. I'll keep your coins, I want change. What can we do about it? It's one of the biggest issues of our lifetime, I guess, isn't it? How do we deal with poverty? How do we deal with inequality? But by dealing with poverty, we can deal with climate change. We can deal with biodiversity loss. We can deal with all these other big issues. It's all linked. Okay, and finally, energy security. So what do I mean by energy security? Well, I mean it's about where we get our energy from and whether it's still going to be there in the future. So issues such as oil and other fuel depletion, okay? So there isn't as much accessible reserves of oil and gas and coal as there used to be. There still is quite a lot of oil, gas and coal, but it's more expensive for us to get to it. I mean, if you see in the UK news about fracking, for instance, we can extract gas out of reserves we couldn't previously or are more difficult, but it's more expensive because it's more difficult, which means it's harder to heat your home, it's more expensive to run your project, it's more expensive to run your society. In the UK, we have a big problem with reliance on foreign sources of energy. We are not energy independent in the UK. Majority of our energy comes from overseas, and it's the same with a lot of countries, okay? Energy demand from advancing developing countries. As we globalise, as conditions improve in countries such as China, we have more energy demand. Environmental issues such as climate change and energy insecurity risks fueling conflict. So what are the issues? Yeah, as I said, the amount of oil wells, oil reduction, this is the Hubbard curve. He predicted that we would start to run out of energy at about the year 2005 in terms of oil reserves. We have, to a degree, he was right, he predicted this in the 1950s, and our oil reserves are declining. We are finding new ones all the time, but they're in the awfulest places. Tar sands, fracking in deep geological wells, Gulf of Mexico, very deep oil drilling. So we can still get oil, but it's difficult to get it. And what does difficult mean? Scarcity. What does scarcity mean? more expensive. Okay? So we do have an issue. Okay, and where is oil? This is another issue I've got. Hang on a minute. Let me go back to this one. Increasing demand for energy. In the Western world, developed countries, we are slightly reducing our energy use. We're getting a bit better at using it. The United States declining slightly. The OECD countries, which is Europe, Japan and Australia, we are losing a bit. The big problem I've got is developing countries who rightly are looking to improve their quality of life, and their energy consumption is rising. So we're competing against other countries. Other country, where is oil? Where do we get our oil from? This is from the UK. Where do we get our resources from? Well, at the moment, oil is mostly located in Russia, Saudi Arabia, Libya, Iran, Nigeria, Algeria. Same with gas, Russia mainly, Algeria, Nigeria, some other states. What do we notice about these places? And no disrespect to people from these regions, but they are not the most politically stable regions of the world in often most cases. So the security of the supply is tenuous sometimes. We had a big problem in Europe 5 years ago, maybe a bit longer, where most of the gas that comes into Europe flows through Russia. The Ukraine had a dispute. I don't know if you remember this. They had a dispute with Russia. They said, Russia said, we're going to put our prices up. And the Russian state-owned gas company, Ukraine said, we're not going to pay them. They said, okay, no problem, we'll just turn the tap off. And they stopped the supply of gas to the Ukraine. What did that mean for Ukrainians? Well, A, it meant they were cold. B, it meant their industry couldn't run. B, it meant they had no electricity because all their power stations were gas-fired. They turned around and said, okay, fair enough, turn it back on, we'll pay your price. So a lot of nations now are trying to become energy independent. They're trying to understand how they can contribute to their own mix so they're not at the whims of some of the states, which is one of the reasons why we're pushing in the UK for nuclear, because the UK said, well, okay, we can control our own resources. But also why we're trying to move to renewable resources, indigenous resources. The economics of oil, the price of oil is a massive problem at the moment. This is where it was in 1985, this is where we are now. This here was the stock market crash recently when oil fell through the roof. We're rising back up again. This is the scenario the UK thought we were going to have for the price of oil back in 2000. This is where we thought it was going to be in 2005. This is where we think it's going to be in 2020. Energy prices are increasing. This has a direct effect on you guys as project managers, of course, because you need energy to run your projects. So we need to try to find ways to be more efficient with energy, I guess, or maybe diversify our supply away from expensive sources of energy. So what can we do about it? Yeah, maybe we could do fracking. Yeah. Sorry, look at Kieran here, because Kieran said he liked fracking the other day. But we could do fracking. Yeah, we can exploit these non-traditional sources, but they're still expensive, and there are some environmental issues. And in the UK, there is a lot of bad feeling about this at the moment, rightly or wrongly, and so it's unlikely to happen in any great quantity. What about nuclear? A lot of countries are going for nuclear. Well, UK has decided it wants to go down the nuclear route. Fukushima, okay, a little bit scary. And some nations, Germany notably, have decided that they're not going to have any nuclear power stations at all. Same in Japan. Risk management, I guess. They think it's a bit too risky an option to go for. The other issue with nuclear is it's extremely expensive to set up. If we were to build a new nuclear plant in the UK, we're looking at 20-odd years before it's actually producing enough energy.
How come UK are so, well, they want to go down the nuclear route so much more than other countries if, you know?
Because we don't have an alternative. We're a small island. The natural resources that we did have, coal, oil, gas, we've pretty much used up. We have renewable options, of course, but there's issues with that as well, with people not wanting to go with wind turbines on land, wind turbines on sea is expensive. The UK government doesn't want to put money into it, so companies such as EDF, French energy company, and other companies are basically coming to the government and selling their wares, if you like. So, yeah. The government's decided to go down nuclear because it's the quickest and easiest way. The other reason is the UK is the only country in the world to have a stringent carbon reduction, legally binding target. In the UK, we've decided we're going to reduce our carbon emissions by 80% by 2050 from our 1990 levels. The only country in the world to go for that target. Sounds fantastic. Yeah, let's hold up the flag. How are we going to do that? Oh, shit. Nuclear is probably the easiest, quickest route to do that.
But most dangerous, probably.
But potentially the most dangerous, yeah? Jury's out on that. A lot of people say, well, new generation of nuclear power stations, very, very good, very clean. However, there's something I'll introduce you to next week called the precautionary principle. What that states is, you know, if you are not sure of the harm or the potential danger of doing something, you just don't do it just in case. And that kind of applies to nuclear. We're not sure what happens to the waste. We're not sure what to do with it. We can't be sure. And we can't study it because it will be there for hundreds of thousands of years. So my kind of view on it is, we're not quite sure what we should do with it. Maybe we should just back off. Okay? The other view that I have personally is, all of the money we put into nuclear, if we take that out and put it into renewable and energy efficiency measures, we can achieve the same aim. That's my view anyway. But the government's going for the nuclear option. Maybe it's lobbying by companies, maybe it's a quick and easy solution. I don't know. But you can debate that amongst yourselves. How you feel on nuclear? Actually, nuclear used to be the big bad thing for all environmentalists, yeah? Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, everybody like that. Nuclear, no way, no chance. Now, a lot of very ardent anti-nuclear supporters are actually turning to it. Because they're saying, okay, it's not the best solution, but it is the only way we can decarbonise our energy supply quickly enough to stop climate change. So views on nuclear are changing. Okay, so what can we do about it? Number one, always number one, reduce demand. First lesson you will ever learn in energy is reduce demand. If you don't have to use it in the first place, you don't have to pay for it. It's economically sound, it's good for carbon, it's good for other reasons. So reduce the demand in the first place. When you've done everything you can to reduce your demand, increase your efficiency. So what you are bringing in, make sure it's getting there in the most efficient way. Okay? One of the big problems within the UK, we've got a centralised energy supply. All of our big power stations are in remote areas of the country. Because let's face it, who wants to live next to a big power station? So then we have to send our electricity through distribution lines. And we lose about 30% of that electricity just from going down these wires. Okay? So it's inefficient. It's much more efficient to use it at source in the cities. But how do we do that? How do we generate enough power in a city to use it there? Next rule, I guess, is to try to diversify our sources for energy security. If all of our energy is coming from oil, bad. Okay, what happens if the oil gets too expensive or it disappears? Why do we have some from oil, some from renewables, some from nuclear, some from gas? So we're trying to kind of hedge our bets, I guess. So that's another thing we could potentially do about it. Another thing that we're doing in the UK, we're trying to come up with these new smart grids. There's lots of projects at the moment around smart grids. Okay, so our energy system in most of the developed world were developed in the 1950s around this model of cheap fuel power stations in the middle of nowhere. Our lines were all supposed to transmit energy into homes and into factories and businesses. Now we're trying to spin that on our heads and put power back the other way by using solar power and wind turbines, for instance, anaerobic digesters, biomass burning, all these renewable sources. The only way we can do that is by redesigning our whole energy infrastructure, our whole energy grid. That's hard, it's expensive. That's what we're trying to do at the moment. So perhaps smart energy is the way to go. We look at smart appliances, things like washing machines, okay? You know, dishwashers, these whole household appliances. They know when the energy is cheap, okay? So you turn your washing machine on and it doesn't do anything until middle of the night when it's cheap, for instance. Fridges, okay, refrigerators. There are smart ones now that will turn themselves on and off, depending on, you know, to keep the power. They don't run constantly. There are lots of ways we can do this using technology. So that's what we're trying to do. Okay, so what are the implications on this? So this is, I guess, is what I need to what I want you to think about over the next few weeks, and we're going to be discussing this in more detail. So what are the implications of these big issues in your daily life? And hopefully I've tried to give you some idea. Those of you that are kind of pay your own energy bills, you've got kids, it has a massive, my energy bill's gone up by 50% in the last year pretty much. So it has a massive effect on me in my pocket. Last night's out in the pub, bad news. What are the implications of these for project managers? What's the implications of more expensive energy? What's the implications of potentially more storms economically? What's the implications for society, for poverty? If you're doing a project in sub-Saharan Africa, where are you going to get your workforce from? How are you going to develop them? What can businesses and PM do to address the issues? Quite often, business and project management as a part of business is seen as the devil. you know, capitalist, devil, trying to make money, causing all these problems. But then there's a school of thought which I actually subscribe to. It says that business is probably the only way we can deal with these issues. Governments don't have any money nowadays. Nations don't have that much money to spend. The politicians are fighting over what to do. We've got companies such as Apple who have a bigger economy than several countries. So maybe business has the only capacity to deal with these issues. And what can we as project managers do to help business deal with these issues? So more to this can come on future lectures. So every week I will give you some suggested reading. This is it for this week. You know, just 4 nice easy things to read, which basically gives you an overview of those 4 issues I've talked about. So that's for you to read in your own time. And I will also do, that should say references, not suggested reading.
Is this Prezi going to be on Blackboard?
Yeah, all the Prezi will be on Blackboard. It was on before this actually. So I'll give you some references. When you do your assessment, which we'll talk about next week, you can use these as your starting point. Please don't just give me back all the things I've already given you. This is your starting point. So what we're going to do in the seminars over the next couple of days is we're going to try to look at the implications of climate change for your region, okay? So we'll think about what's going to happen on the ground where you are from, where you live. And then we'll think about what that means for a project manager. What issues will you have to deal with, and does it mean anything for a project manager? So hopefully you would have done some of the reading that I asked you to do, and we can contribute to that in the seminars. Okay, thank you very much. It's all gone quiet. It's not all doom and gloom. We get the good stuff afterwards. The solutions are coming.